We have featured the organisation Hope Not Hate previously on Windows on the World. See our show Hope Not Hate and Israel's Lobbyists. We have also featured the subversive tactics used by this organisation against people who are acting responsibly and within the law. The Hope Not Hate website states, "We are passionate believers in liberty and free speech." It has been revealed recently that this group are acting as what could legally be described as a terrorist organisation. Here is the commonly used dictionary definition of terrorism: the systematic use of violence and intimidation to achieve some goal, and the use of violence and threats to intimidate or coerce, especially for political purposes. There have been allegations of publishing photographs and addresses of people they have targeted, setting up fake Twitter accounts to discredit people, and threats and actual violence by those associated with this organisation. So Hope Not Hate targets whoever they personally feel fits their interpretation of hate. The organisations, political parties and the people they target are bound by the laws of the land they operate in. So why can this group act as vigilantes and incite hatred against citizens of the UK who are acting within the law? On the Hope Not Hate website it states, Hope Not Hate seeks to challenge and defeat the politics of hate and extremism within local communities, building resilience against the politics of hate and fear at a national and grassroots level. In order to maximise our contribution to the debate and comply with all UK legislation, Hope Not Hate operates via two separate and distinct legal entities, through which we deliver a range of activities and services. So let's look at its obligations as a charitable trust. To be a charity, your charity must have only charitable purposes, which must be for the public benefit. This is known as the public benefit requirement. The trustee's annual report must explain how the trust has carried out its purpose for the public benefit. On the Hope Not Hate website it states, "We are passionate believers in liberty and free speech." On Tuesday, May the 2nd, 2017, Hope Not Hate posted information that a talk by Nick Colostrum was being held at Diorama Arts Centre. The article stated that Colostrum was a Holocaust denier. The author Joe Mulhall is on the board of the Holocaust Remembrance Alliance. However, the talk had nothing to do with any Holocaust anywhere whatsoever. The group has never discussed any Holocaust. The post stated, "Leading Holocaust denier speaking in central London tonight." The Keep Talking group run by Ian Phantom for conspiracy theorists of all types, from Holocaust deniers, climate change deniers and 9/11 truthers. Its past guests include Piers Corbyn, brother of Jeremy, who claimed man-made climate change is a lie. Well, yes, it is, and it's been proven. So, everything on the site is like an exercise in basic psychological subversion. The question is, do these propagandists actually believe all this, or are they themselves victims of the type of propaganda they now peddle on behalf of global financial interests? Or is all this coming through them as third-party agents of the intelligence services, as their tactics mirror those of military intelligence and include the 4 Ds: deny, disrupt, degrade and deceive? Welcome back to Windows on the World. We're talking about the group and charitable trust Hope Not Hate, who are going around the country causing disruption at perfectly lawful meetings. And we're now going to talk to Ian Phantom from the 9/11 Keep Talking group, who were recently a victim of Hope Not Hate and Antifa, who seem to have started to go round with people from Hope Not Hate at events, and Antifa are quite dangerous. They are also linked to Black Bloc, and basically these people put bandanas on their faces and disrupt meetings and or have a go at individuals they don't particularly like. So I'm just going to read a quote out from somebody who was actually at the 9/11 Keep Talking meeting that night from a lady. She said, "I have never been the object of so much hatred," which is ironic as the organisation's called Hope Not Hate. So Ian, welcome to Windows on the World.
Thank you very much. I think it should be titled Hope Not Hate.
Well, this a real problem that they've come up with that name because it's going to backfire on them quite badly, and it already has. There's a lot of stuff on the internet about them. Now, you started the 9/11 Keep Talking group. When did you start the group, and what were its objectives?
2010, and we called it Keep Talking. That was actually my byword when I sent my newsletters round. And the idea is that in order to combat the continuous propaganda, we have to play the same game in keeping it rolling. So I remembered, for instance, the David Shayler affair. It hit the headlines for some time, and then the Diana thing came along, and then it just all fizzled out. You can hit the headlines and then be marginalised, and the establishment has an enormous ability to amnesiate the public. That's my word that I've started using. And actually, I came into this when I started talking about the most famous journalist in the world, who initiated the new journalism in the 1880s, W.G. Stead, and immediately, and I was just amazed because I was working on the centenary of an organisation that he'd been instrumental in setting up. He'd been the main contributor of it, and within that organisation, they're just shutting me up. They can amnesiate the public. So it's no use having a flash in the pan and then exhausting ourselves and it all gets forgotten. I just wanted to keep the thing going, even if it doesn't seem that we're getting very far, and not to control people, but to enable people to do their own thing, like you're doing, Nick's doing, I'm doing. But we're not a membership organisation that controls and says, right, now we're going to campaign on this or that, but we help each other.
I think it's also worth pointing out that it's not like a one agenda group. I mean, it was originally about the 9/11, Keep Talking, but it's really just keep talking now, isn't it? So it's keeping talking about things that aren't covered by the mainstream media and things that have been proven in history to be real conspiracies that have happened. So there's a lot of intellectual input into this group, and this group has been targeted over the years quite surprisingly often. And that's probably, in my view, because the people in it are quite heavyweights in their own field. They would stand up in any debate and be able to defeat opposition, and that is probably what is the threat to certain organisations and even government out there, because the narrative is being controlled now more than ever, and this group are coming in and they are really acting like thugs of a police state, and you've now been the victim of that. So let's just go back to that night when they turned up. What did you think when they were surrounding the building?
Well, I didn't know at first. We were in the room itself and there were no windows, and we were setting the chairs out and laying everything out. I'd arrived quite early. I think it was at 6 o'clock, and other people were drifting in. And there were about 8 of us before the receptionist came down, Kate, and said there's a demonstration outside, and they're talking about... she mentioned the forum. I said, well, that's not us. You know, we've got a member who is in...
You're referring there to the London Forum, which is a separate group which has meetings which are private because they could be construed by organisations such as Hope Not Hate as slightly more extreme, in that they are more nationalistic, for instance, whereas your group is not really talking about those sort of issues.
That's right.
You're not a political group at all, whereas the London Forum could maybe be described as more of a political group. So you're more of a research group in...
That's exactly it, yes. I've never been to the London Forum, and I've heard about it, but they have an agenda, and in all groups you've got to think, well, who's genuine and who isn't, including ours. And I've joined 1 or 2 groups over the last 10 years, but I would never ever, after my own experiences 10 years ago, join a membership association without being prepared to be checked out for long-standing friends to turn on you and show them that they've been fakes for years. I was saying 10 years ago they could do it to anyone. They could do it for wearing brown shoes. Hey, look, he wears brown shoes. You can imagine that actually working in a school playground. And these people, if that's not too strong a word, are using the same tactics as primary school.
They're using basic psychological subversion tactics, which are very, very simple once you know how they work. And it's usually about
primary school children know how they work,
yes.
And then they grow out of it. But it is all planned, and they know exactly
it's
what
reversal,
they're doing.
and they also do things by association.
That's right.
Which is quite hilariously funny, because there was a male journalist who came down to one of your meetings trying to entrap Piers Corbyn into 3 separate subjects which had nothing to do with climate change or what Piers was talking about. So if you're a climate change denier, then you could be a Holocaust denier as well, and also you could think that Elvis's brain is on the moon. This is the way it kind of works,
right.
Isn't it?
That's exactly how it works.
That's exactly how it
And
works. By association. And what I was going to say, Ian, was this, that by associating you with the London Forum, that's very dangerous in the respect that you're not a political group or have any political affiliations. It's a loose group of intellectuals who come together to listen to other people and open themselves up to new ideas and things that affect everybody worldwide. So it's geopolitical. So it affects everybody. So by linking you with who they're calling Nazis, and of course by the linking of this talk, which was about the Westminster Bridge attacks, to Nick Colostrum and his book, because Nick was giving the talk. Nick wrote a book called Breaking the Spell about the Holocaust. So this is how they do it. So really, that the thing was kind of farcical in a way, because they were down there calling you lot of fascists when you were talking about a possible interpretation of a terrorist attack which had happened in London. And it was about the narrative of that attack. So it had nothing to do with anything racial. It had nothing to do with anything political. It was about an event that had happened in London. So it's quite ridiculous the way they turned up with masks on their faces to beat everybody up as though they were at some kind of 80s BNP rally or something. You know, the thing was ridiculous. Yeah.
In fact, we were asked to stay downstairs, to stay in that room. It was on the ground floor, but there were no windows, and not to take any photos because it might provoke them. Well, I stayed there a little while and thought, no, there's something wrong here. So I went along to where I could see them from a side window, and I saw these RMT flags. I thought, RMT? What's RMT? It's a trade union for transport. It can't be for us then, I thought. And I took a photo from the side and then started mingling with people. But it was for us because they were targeting
I think this is the dangerous thing, because this organisation, they sort of court credibility. They've got this website where they look as though they're a community-based group that's helping people. This was originally their propaganda, which has obviously now changed. I mean, they are starting to look ridiculous, and more and more people are finding that out. But they're coercing people into their events on a completely false premise. That's what it looked like to me, because the people who were there from the RMT thought there was some big fascist event going on, and of course it was just a meeting of a group which is completely lawful and has never actually had a political agenda.
It's based on deception,
yes,
very definitely, but I think there has to be an element of intimidation all round, and this isn't just a one-off. If we've got vigilante groups targeting us, then anyone to do with current affairs isn't safe.
Now, there are many think tanks and organisations, non-government organisations and lobbying groups now. And Demos is a government think tank, which you had some interaction with several years ago, when they produced a paper about conspiracy theories. Can you tell us a bit about that? 'Cause it ties in really to what this group's about.
Well, it was shortly after we set up our group. I think actually it was 2010 still. And I saw an announcement of a paper by Demos called The Power of Unreason. And that they were recommending to government that they introduce what did they call it? Not covert, but open infiltration was the term. It's an oxymoron. So I acquired the paper, the report, read it, and wrote a report about it, and invited those people to come to our group to demonstrate what they were advocating, which was that the government should send in open infiltrators to give alternative information. Naturally, before I did that, I gave a talk myself beginning, good evening, I'm from the government and I'm here to help you, and explained what they were actually advocating. But I didn't expect them to respond to my request, so I wrote my analysis to 4 government ministers who were on the advisory board of Demos, and said in the covering letter, do you really want to be associated with this outfit? With the hope that at least one of them would ask Demos what it's all about, and that would put pressure on them to actually attend our meeting, because if they flaked out, then they would be undermining their own cause. And it worked. They accepted. Someone joined our group about that time and said, I can arrange venue for you. And we finished up at Goldsmiths College, where he was supposedly doing a PhD on conspiracy theories. And he said, I've got a colleague, Robert Brotherton, who's doing a PhD on conspiracy theories in the psychology department. So we finished up in a lecture theatre at Goldsmiths College. It was crammed full. I knew there was something wrong as soon as I arrived, because it wasn't in the building he'd said, and blah, blah, blah. There were no posters, and there were no indications where the room was. And he actually announced it to his own people to begin half an hour early, so that by the time our people got there, we started, and their own people had more or less packed the room out, and there were quite a lot of people from Demos itself. And I had to go in. I'd gone to the toilet. When I got back, they were starting the meeting without me. I had to retrieve the chair from blocking the door open and sit down and take control. So it was like that right through. But they demonstrated what it would be like to live in that society if their recommendations were accepted. And one of the recommendations was the setting up of vigilante groups that had nothing to do with government, because government would be seen to be shouldn't be seen to be involved in this, but they didn't say how they should be set up. And actually, the guy 2 meters in front of me on the front row started bawling out insults in full volume against Kevin Boyle, whom we've just interviewed. And Kevin's a physics teacher. He knows about 9/11 and the physical impossibilities and the laws.
Well, that was one of the most powerful things that happened on that night, when Kevin actually piped up and put the guy on the spot and said, I'm a physics teacher, and any elementary look at this through physics that's taught in schools can tell you that the official story is nonsense.
Yeah. Now that was videoed.
I'm paraphrasing.
That was videoed in real time on the internet, and there was another video camera on the other side. And the infiltrator afterwards was very offended that someone had said he couldn't follow the sound on the live video, which I think was intentional, which is why they had 2 cameras. Then he said, I've not got time to edit it. This is I'm going to post the rushes. That's the crude video, the whole lot. But he had actually cut that bit out and various other bits. But I had to call the meeting to order, and actually I yelled back at that infiltrator. I'd met him before, I recognised him. And
well, this happens all over, Ian. I mean, that's an example of what happens with this group. I mean, it is infiltrated, as are all groups now. But what your point about that was very interesting. So they were starting to say in 2011 that they should be, or they, or people should be setting up vigilante groups and talking about open infiltration.
That's right.
So now we're seeing the results of that. So in your opinion, do you think the tactics that Hope Not Hate are using are coming from the intelligence services and or the government?
Well, whether or not they got this directly from Demos had instigated, inspired that sort of thuggish behaviour. And very clearly, if they're saying the government shouldn't be involved in that, they should just arise spontaneously. It's got to be organised behind the scenes.
Yes.
And actually, Demos originally was Tony Blair's favourite think tank. It was behind New Labour. But by the time this happened, they said, oh, we're an all-party think tank. And they had MPs on their board from all three main parties. And this was during the coalition time, so that I could write to 2 Lib Dem people and 2 Conservative people on that board, plus 1 or 2 others who would have had an interest, like my own MP and who was a cabinet minister and so on. But yeah, that has been instigated by them, whether or not Hope Not Hate.
Well, it's interesting because our show, Fake Media Echo Chamber Exposed, was put out there. Kevin was on that because I thought it was extremely important because they'd been announced by Demos, this paper on echo chambers and conspiracy people in their own echo chambers, and it was all over the mainstream media. It was on the BBC, it was on Sky News, people from Demos openly saying echo chamber, and then it was all over LBC, the London Broadcasting, the leading Britain's conversation station, which is in London. So these things are filtering down quickly. So a paper comes out, and all of a sudden it's like the biggest PR story. It's like what would happen if war had just broken out.
And that was a brilliant example of the mainstream media echoing what they were told. It's ironic.
Yes. So there we go. That's a little bit about Hope Not Hate and the background of this and how it's now being played out in your community. Welcome to Windows on the World. I'm Mark Windows. Now, over the years, we've put out a lot of information. The Windows on the World show has run for several years now. We've exposed corruption, found solutions, and put out some very useful information on many subjects since we started doing this. This includes, of course, the bigger picture, along with well-researched history, science, and, of course, health matters, which we also cover. Now, our initial website was landofthefree.co.uk, and this was set up to fight the corporate courts, rogue bailiffs, and the unlawful actions of public officials. I and many others have successfully fought criminal bailiff companies and won in court against dishonest councils. This information is all still available. The journalistic integrity of Windows on the World is very important, and we tried to put out information that's forensically accurate and simplistic as possible. So we try and put everything out in a very easy way for people to understand, because over the years there's been a lot of misinformation and disinformation, especially with where people stand within the law, and it's got a lot of people into trouble. So we've always stayed on the right side of the law, but being able to empower people to go into court and do the right thing. That's very important to us. Now, I put this information out to the public because I feel it needs to be there. And even within so-called alternative media, there is much information which is misleading and incorrect. In fact, all the things the now ridiculous mainstream media accuses the alternative media of, there are people putting out stuff that's very, very unhelpful, and we try not to do that. So we accept no funding from anybody and are completely independent. And it's now increasingly necessary that we get some help to fund what we're doing. We're looking for sponsors from self-employed small business sector, which, as we know, is being destroyed, and we cover this a lot on the show with the plans for regeneration, the soaring business rates, and the destruction of what we used to know as our environment, because we're finding that people now are being pushed out and socially engineered from the places that they need to be. We'd also like to appeal to individuals who might be able to donate. Now, the donate button on the site, you can just scroll down to the bottom of the page, and it's also on every article and every video on the site. on windowsontheworld.net. Now, I've never asked for any donations before, but things are getting a bit tighter for us and we want to carry on and expand what we're doing. That's the most important thing, to expand what we're doing and be able to bring you much more information, which is very difficult at the moment because there's just a few of us. So, the bottom line is, if you can spare a few quid and enjoy what we're doing, press the donate button, we'll be very grateful. And if there's anybody out there, small businesses, who benefit from the sort of information that we put out, and we know there's quite a few because we've been contacted by them, if you'd like to make a small contribution or help out in any way, we'd be most grateful. That's the end of that, and we'll see you soon on Windows on the World.